This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
I want to share with you a Darkei Moshe, which I was really not aware of, regarding the inyan of washing one's hands for karpas, which really opens up a new dimension of Leil Seder. I always thought, and what's brought in the poskim of why to wash before karpas is because we're eating a vegetable and it's dipped in a liquid, and typically one is required, at least the psak of the Mishnah Berurah, is that one is required to wash one's hands before one eats an item which is dipped in one of the 7 mashkim. There's a question if that is so, even if it's less than a kazayas. And even if one is not required to, but the night of Pesach we do it anyway, kedei sheyishalu. These are the 2 basic reasons to wash for karpas. Either it's an absolute requirement, which is the position of the Mishnah Berurah, or it's to elicit the children to ask questions. But there's a very interesting Darkei Moshe. Darkei Moshe sort of is struggling. Why should we have to wash our hands before we dip the karpas in the salt water? And the Darkei Moshe says, Mihu, this is in Siman Taf Ayin Gimel Sivkata on Yud Beis, Efshar Loimer, the Sipur HaHaggadah Harei Kamei Tefillah. Saying the Haggadah is like a prayer. Sha'anu Mesaprim Kvoid Hakel Ushvacha V'Yisala. We are relating Hashem's praise. L'chein tzarich kan netila. Therefore you need netilas yadayim. So that's an amazing insight of Darkei Moshe, that the inyan of washing before karpas is an inyan of netila letfila. So this opens up a new dimension to the Haggadah. One would have thought, what's the Haggadah? The Haggadah is Sipur Neflois Hashem. And it's a specific mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of Higara Talabincha. But the Ramah is opening up a new dimension, that somehow there is a dimension of tefillah to the Haggadah ad kedei kach, that there's a chi of netila before the Haggadah. Now, we know that tefillah has many dimensions to it. It would fit very well into, according to this train of thought. Many Rishonim say that soon after the Haggadah begins, we say Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shnasan Torah Lama Yisrael. And many Rishonim, Shibali Haleket, the Ritva, Rabbeinu Yeshaya, and others say, why are we saying Baruch Shnasan Torah? We're making Birchas HaTorah. We're making Birchas HaTorah because we're about to darshan psukim. So again, there seems to be a Seder to this tefillah. Somehow the Haggadah, the Ramah is classifying as tefillah. It even has some type of Birchas HaTorah to it. So what I found very interesting is that we know that before the Manashtana, the Lashon of the Gemara is that Mazgulai Kais Sheni, V'kan Haben Shoyal. You pour the second cup, and here the son asks, and all the Sifrei Chasidus bring down V'kan Haben Shoyal, that this is an opportunity, like a once-a-year opportunity at this juncture, during Magid, at the Seder, for somebody to ask for all of their requests. Kan haben shel, almost like a play on words. Kan haben shel. Here, we're banam la Hashem lekeichem, and here is an opportunity to ask for one's needs. Where does that come in? Middle of the Haggadah. Why would there be a juncture, middle of the Haggadah? We're in the middle of being mekayim a mitzvah. Well, what's the inyan all of a sudden? Kan haben shel. But the Darkei Moshe is classifying that the Amiras Haggadah is begeder tefillah. Then perhaps there is some basis for this idea that the Haggadah is begeder tefillah. Maybe the Ramah classifies the Haggadah as sipur kvoid hakel ushvachav, but perhaps there's also a dimension of bakasha as well. It's interesting, the Archaim HaKadosh in Parshas Bo, on the pasuk V'yigadta labincha bayemahu lemar, says he wants to know the word lemar is extra. It should say V'yigadta labincha bayemahu. What's lemar? It's not V'yidabra Hashem al Moshe lemar. What's V'yigadta labincha bayemahu lemar? So he says that we know the Rambam says that you're supposed to say over the story to your son. But what do you do if you don't have a son? So the halacha says, well, tell it to yourself. Well, where do we learn that from? From where do we learn that if you don't have a son, you should say it to yourself? I mean, that's if somebody sees you talking to yourself, they may recommend that you be institutionalized. So you have to tell yourself. You're not to think it. You have to tell yourself. It doesn't say the words. Telling yourself is different than davening. By davening, you're not telling yourself. But Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim, you need to tell yourself. The Archaim HaKadosh says we learn it out from the word lemar. And then the Archaim HaKadosh adds, Ulai, Shem Yagid Haggadah Ha'amura Be'inyin, Yizakeu Hashem Sheyagid Levnai. That if you're Mekayim the lemar when you don't have a son, maybe you'll be Zoicha maybe it's a zechus that you'll be zoichet to have it done. In fact, people use this Orach Chaim HaKadosh as a skula to be nifgad b'zar chai v'kayama, that they actually say over this Orach Chaim HaKadosh when the Seder is over. But we see somehow the night of the Seder is mesugal for a person's tefillah to be answered. One would not have thought there's any inyan of tefillah at all in the Haggadah. Yet we see from the Ramah that the inyan of Natila for Karpas is Natila Latfila. So I want to end off by saying over a drasha that Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher said over. Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher is printed in the back of the Gemaras. You have Hagois from Eliyahu Gutmacher. In fact, the whole inyan, people get very worked up by a bris. When the baby's crying, it became a big inyan. It became one of the Aser Sadibros that you have to daven when the baby's crying. Where does that come from? It's the Hagois of Eliyahu Gutmacher, Masechta Shabbos. So he gave a drasha in Tafrei Shayin Beis, 1912, about the Kedusha of Leil Seder, and he asked the question. I was always bothered by this question. I've seen many answers, and he says an amazing teretz. He has one simple question on the Megillah. Back to the Megillah. He says, Haman made a decree on Yud Gimel Nisan. And the decree was prepared to occur on Yud Gimel Adar. Okay. So Mordechai and Esther hear about the Gzeira, and they have about 11 months to daven and to fast and to mevatel the Gzeira. Now, if you have to pick a day when to fast and when to cry out, the last day that anyone would choose would be Pesach. It's the only day of the year you have a mitzvah, aseh da'iraisa, to actually eat a certain item. So why fast davka on a day that you're mechuyev to eat? So wait 3 days, nothing's going to happen. There's no difference whether you fast the next day, the day after Haman's Gzera, or you wait. Why don't you try being Mekayim the mitzvah sayam? We have so many mitzvahs the night of the Seder. Why were they mevatel Pesach? Just wait a little bit. What's the big rush? That's the kasha of Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher. By the way, look in the Tfer Shlomo, he also deals with this question. But what was the big rush? So Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher says as follows, that the power of tefillah on Pesach is so potent, is so powerful, that they needed Pesach Dika Tfilas. That's what he says. That Mordechai and Esther realized that the Koyach HaTfilah of Pesach is so powerful that since it's a time of Nisim, since it's a time of great miracles Rebbeinu Shalom did, and we say Sha'asa Nisim La'av, say Bayamim Ha'hem, Bazman Hazeh, that the Jewish calendar is a living calendar, and as the miracle happens at a certain time, it's recurring every year at that time. So since this time is Mesugal for Nisim, they could not pass the opportunity, and it was Kedai Timavatel Matzah, and all the mitzvahs Achila, in order to take advantage of the Koyach HaTfilah of Pesach, which is Mesugal Lanisim. And Mestama, the most important tefillah that we're going to say on Pesach, is the tefillah of the end of the Haggadah, and that is L'shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. It's not a statement of hope. It's not just, by the way, next year we plan on being in Yerushalayim. It's a tefillah. It's a tefillah. Because as the Baal Nesivai says, that every miracle Rebbeinu Shalom did for us, Alachas Kama V'Kama, Toiva Kefula U'Mechupelas, the Baal Haggadah says. Every miracle was kefula u'mechupelas. What does that mean? That's a redundant expression. What does it mean, kefula u'mechupelas? So the Baal Nesiva says in the Masanisim Haggadah that the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim were only a dress rehearsal, only practice, were only masa avos siman labanim. For the Gula Hasida, it was begeder ki meitzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim arenu neflois. That's not just an expression. By the way, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, and He's also going to do miracles for us in the future. No. The way with which the Rebbeinu Shalom will make miracles with us in the future is through the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim is only practice for the Gula Hasida. So after we relate all the events with which the Rebbeinu Shalom created the Gula Hasida, after we relate all the makos, which were kefula mechupelas, the Nesiva says, because they were doubled. They had in them that makkah and the potential for the nisim of la'asad lavai, were mispalel l'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. We hope all of our tefillos, kan haben shaya, all our tefillos should be neskabel, we should be zoicha kishem. The Medrash Tanchuma says, shebetesvav b'nisan nigalu, but we should be zoicha betesvav b'nisan asidin ligal. Wishing everyone a chag kosher v'sameach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.